Hello, we're back on Animal Audit Corner. From that short break, I'm back. And this time I'm going to give you the story on the fair game tactic. Now, I know I did it before, but like I mentioned, someone hacked into my computer and just deleted everything. So I have to do all the stories all over again. So, right now I'm going to give you the story of the Scientology's fair game tactic. The fair game practice has been created by L. Ron Hubbard in 1965. The practice was created to deal with people that Scientology would deem as evil. They use this practice on former members, journalists, and critics. This is usually a very dangerous practice that they have in that criminal organization. Then their victims they go to their victim's house. They would start to follow them from one place to another. Some people know that they are being followed and some don't. Hurting people through fair game is the most worst thing L. Ron Hubbard ever came up with. When they fair game, they would stalk, harass, and intimidate everyone. They even went as far as vandalizing other people's property and theirs and their victims' property. They even go dumpster diving by going through other people's trash, and if a sanitation worker has it, they would track them down and pay them for their trash. Yeah, well, guess what? Hold out for more money. Tell them to give you $1,000 and they can have it. $20 is nothing nowadays. It's cheap. Hold out for $1,000 and then let them have it if they give it to you. But other than that, don't give it to them unless they give you $1,000. They got paid over the security company or the private investigating company would be given over $1 million to surveil all their victims and follow them. This is how they are using their tax exempt status, as I mentioned before. If it's a critic like a protesters, they would get their members to attack them by using unusual tactics to attack them. OSA, or Office of Special Affairs, and David Miscavige would send private investigators to go after them. They would find out where they are living and drive to their place of residence and park outside and start to surveil them. Those guys would get their money from the Office of Special Affairs, or OSA, abbreviated version, and David Miscavige got it from their members as donations by squeezing money out of them. Now, they don't do that in a normal church. In the normal church, they would think, you know what, if they don't have it, they don't have it. We're not going to ask them for money. But these guys, they just squeeze it out of them. Also would use tables to block all the doors and start to collect money from them, even though they only paid them $50. But their wealthy members that they squeeze it out of, only they don't believe they are actually doing that. They don't think they're ripping them off, basically. In Los Angeles, protesters were swatted because of OSA's decided to call the police and tell them that the protesters had guns and that they were firing them. Then the police went into the street thinking it was a crime scene and started to SWAT them. One of them was a minor. Police patted them down and found out that there was no gun. After the swatting, police didn't do any investigations on why it happened and how it happened. They didn't. And the reason why they won't do an investigation on them is because they are on Scientology's payroll. That's the reason why the LAPD won't do an investigation on Scientology. It's because they work for them. Scientology will stop at nothing to get even with anyone who speaks the truth about them, and they hate it. On the final note, we all have critics. Do we always like what they say? Of course not. But ultimately, they will always use the fair game practice on former members, journalists, and critics. Were overall some of the Scientologists used as slave labor that gets paid $50 a week would think they're donating their time when they don't realize that they're being used as slave labor. Sometimes they get paid and sometimes they don't. That is, horrible. Then finally, some of the LAPD won't do an investigation on them because they are in bed with Scientology and hired them as security. Then in conclusion, that's how Scientology uses their fake game practices on people. People like journalists, critics, and former members who used to be in that organization. They call it a church. I call it a con job. That tactic has been used since 1965. Is it going to stop? According to Leah Remedy, no, It's always going to be around. And Scientology is going to do whatever it takes to stop people from talking about them. And they're not a church, they're a cult. They're not a religion, they're a cult. And there'll always be a cult. And then, you know what? At the end, even though after they get their tax exempt status taken from them, they're always going to think that they're a church, even though it's not on paper anymore as a church, where in fact they're really a cult. This is after they will get their tax exempt status taken from them. The truth always comes out. And if they think nobody would find out what they were doing, then they're not thinking. They never think. Once the truth comes out, it comes out. And they have to deal with it. And they come up with all these tactics that would stop people from investigating them, like the law enforcement and the government who gets elected for that will put a stop to them. But from the start, since their existence, they've been buttering them up, paying the government officials to look the other way when they commit the crime, and the lawmakers, they would make the laws. They would butter them up by using tactics like take them out to eat, telling them romantic stories about their criminal organization. They use celebrities and wealthy people to butter them up. That's what Tom Cruise does when he gives out his coconut cakes. Yes, he gives out coconut cakes. And then tells romantic stories about, oh, he's in a cool religion, when in fact it's a money laundering, human trafficking cult that traffics everyone from children till the elderly. And they do traffic people from the ages of 18 to 50 and on. They will use every age there is. And then have the government officials and law enforcement look the other way by giving them these little treats. But then you know what? After a while, that eventually those tactics are going to stop, because one day a good police officer, which there are good police officers out there. Yes, they are. But there are some that corrupt, and we have this rude awakening finally on what some people would do to look the other way. But eventually, somewhere down the line, it's going to end. And when it ends, David Miscavige, Tom Cruise will go to prison for using slave labor. But if Tom Cruise decides to testify against his own buddy, which I doubt, then he's going to go to prison himself. But you know what? eventually it would end. I know John Travolta's definitely going to testify against it if that was the case, because he hates Miscavige. He's been trying to get out for years because Scientology and David Miscavige has a lot on him, and they're using it to blackmail him. That's why he's still there. And he doesn't really, according to all the former Scientologists that were in Scientology, said that they don't, that he doesn't go to these Scientology events, even the ISA, whatever they is to call it. He doesn't even go to that. So eventually, I think he will testify because he doesn't like Miscavige. Absolutely not. Neither does Priscilla Presley or her daughter. Elvis Presley's daughter didn't even like him. Now she passed on. And before she passed on, she lost her young son, which is horrible to a mother who loses a child, or any parent at that matter who loses a child. But before she died, she hated Miscavige. Now, their numbers are low, so eventually it's going to come to an end somewhere down the line, even though they're untouchable at this moment. But eventually, somewhere down the line, don't know when, it will all come to an end. And they will be put in prison. And then maybe they'll exist, and maybe at the end, they'll go underground. But all in all, it will be somewhere in the world, just not in public world. It will all be underground right at the end. See you later. In a while, anyway.